So, first off, before I say anything else, I want to apologize about this video. It might seem kind of short and abrupt, like it's just something I did at the spur of the moment. And that's because it is just something I'm doing at the spur of the moment. See, what happened was I had dogs, and as a good dog owner, I take my dogs for a walk. They get a walk every day, sometimes twice. It depends on when I work. But yeah, they walk a lot. And what I've noticed when I'm walking my dogs is that's when ideas tend to just, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the fresh air. I don't know if it's the fact that I'm actually moving and so blood's circulating. I don't know if it's because I'm not as focused on anything while I'm walking my dogs, just looking around, making sure they're not, eating chocolate or bodies that they find on the floor. Okay, so I'm walking them, and I have an idea, and it gets me excited. And of course, I don't have a pen or paper or any other way to write the idea down. So what I do is I turn off my music and I just repeat the idea to myself over and over and over and over again. And I repeated it to myself over and over and over again for a good 30 minutes. And of course, after repeating something to yourself 30 minutes, you get excited about it. You're like, okay, I got to do this. I'm going to do this. This is going to happen. So once I got home, I sat down, turned on my camera, and here I am. Okay, so like any responsible member of a democratically run government, I try my best to stay informed on what's going on in politics. That, and it's really interesting. Not interesting as in my mind's being, spurred on and electrons are firing off and all that, synapses. No, what I mean is interesting is it's like daytime TV. It's a soap opera now. Our political system has become a soap opera. The only real difference between what's going along with Trump and all his inner circle is that unlike in soap operas, something good or bad happening to somebody does not mean the fate of the actual world, which is even bigger incentive to actually watch. Okay, so politics. Back to politics. And not the politicians who somehow managed to fuck everything up. There's two things that I'm mostly focusing on now. I know the third one is usually Trump's investigation, but that's a default at this point. Like if you're paying attention to politics, that's exactly, everybody knows that that's what you're focused on, and that's what's interesting you, and that's what you want to hear about, and that's what you hate that there's a to be continued every single week. But the two main things I'm focusing on, and I think you should be focusing on too, even if you're not in the United States, you should be focused on because it will eventually affect you, are net neutrality and the new tax code. And I think the reasons are obvious. I don't want to go too much into it, but yeah, they're just gonna screw. The changes that they want to make are gonna screw everything up. But I don't want to go too much into that right now. Someday, maybe later in the future, but not right now. But about the tax code, it has some interesting little tidbits. And interesting does not mean good or bad. Interesting is like, you should maybe take a look at this. Just a little closer look. And the one that kind of like fired off this response in me when I was walking the dogs is, I have it right here. It's section 529. And supposedly it's supposed to deal with, well, let me read it to you first, and then I'll explain what the big deal is. And it says, nothing shall prevent an unborn child from being treated as a designated beneficiary or an individual under this section. The term unborn child means a child in utero. The term child in utero means a member of this species, Homo sapien, at any stage of development who is carried in the womb. So what's interesting about this? Well, nothing about the law, the way that I can understand it or that I could really find. I could be wrong because I am a human being, and we are fallible as shit. Is that there's nothing that stops you from saving for somebody else, no matter. Like, people can leave wills to trees. There is a tree that owns property. No. Let me rephrase that. There is the offspring of a tree that owns property. It owns land. The government is very, very flexible about who you can leave land or money to. There's dogs that are richer than you or me will ever be. So there's nothing really in that stops somebody from creating a savings and leaving it to somebody else, or changing a savings to be left to somebody else. Like if you have a savings in your name and you're going to have a child, so you want to change it to their name, you can do that. They can't stop you. But what's interesting is it's saying that a child, unborn child, means a child in universal, and it should be treated as, real. That it's giving an unborn child rights. And what some people are arguing is the fact that it's saying that they have rights. It's going to be that they're, a full-on human being because they're living at that point, and you can't have debt rights. Basically, it's going to be a step that the right's going to take to argue against abortion and try to ban it. That's what it is. They're going to say, well, they have these rights, and we're going to try and ban it because of these rights. So a child in the abortion in the womb should be considered a living thing, and it has its rights and what have you. And I know a lot of pro-lifers are going to be excited because they're going to say, well, if it's a human being, it's a fully living human being, then it's going to have all the rights, and we can get rid of the abortions, and it's going to be a open and shut case. It's not. It's really, really not. It's not. And there's 3 main points I want to discuss as to why that this is not true. The first point is that being a living human being is not as strong as a protection as people would like to think. There's no bill that says that you have to be able to keep on living. Like, you need to be given the stuff that a living person requires to survive. Case in point, when Nestle got in trouble because they were siphoning off the water in California during a drought, and they were being criticized, the chairman, I think his name was Peter something, he came out and said that water is not a human right. It is not, protected under law. Drinking water. There's a difference between laws that protect against something and laws that state you should get something. And being able to have access to drinking water is not a right. I mean, we have laws to protect the quality of drinking water, but that doesn't mean you have a right to get drinking water. And as sad as that is, he was correct. The law does not state that if you're a human being that's alive, that you need adequate shelter, that you have to have food or water or proper medical care. None of that. There's no law that states that as a human being you should be given the things that you need to live a healthy life or even keep living. There's no law that states that you have to survive or that people have to let you live. There's death penalties that still exist. The death penalty still exists because there's no law that states that a human being needs to continue being a human being who's alive. So right off the bat, having a fetus declared a living human does not offer it any guaranteed protections, or even say, yeah, you have to keep living because you're a fetus. The second thing I want to bring up is that even though we don't have a right to continuously survive, we still have rights, and a lot of those rights have to do with property. One of the big ones is, how does your right to property become reduced because somebody is considered a living human being. It doesn't. Now, again, I want to point out something here. I'm not arguing that this is all correct. I'm just trying to say that under our current legal system, this isn't as clear and strong a case as for banning, abortion as pro-lifers want it to be. So where was I? Okay, the point is, people own property, and other people being alive does not alter the right to own property. Medical companies have a right to retain their products if somebody else dies for it. Insurance agencies have the right to deny other people's claims even if somebody could die because of it. Markets, again, they have their right not to give somebody food because if not, they'll starve. That one's a kind of a weird one because I don't know if it was here or Germany that it's not illegal to steal food if you're starving. But again, the point is the corporations or the markets do have a right not to give it away. An apartment complex has a right to deny somebody a housing aboard if they don't pay for the housing aboard, or if they're never given it, never approved for it in the first place, even if somebody could die from not having housing. People who own homes, they have the right to refuse other people entry into their home, regardless of whether or not being refused or not could lead to the other person that wants to go into their death. In fact, people have a right to defend their property with fatal force if need be. Okay, so there you go. You're not guaranteed the right to live anywhere or the right to access anything, regardless of if you need it or not in this country. And the last point, and I'm still kind of not sure if the last point will go in point 2 or if it's its own separate thing. But slavery doesn't exist anymore. Slavery was abolished. People cannot be forced to do other things from other people. There's no ownership. Well, there's no legal ownership. There's still, you can argue that corporations run everything, and we're still technically slaves, but with wages, so it's just an extra step. But the point is, one person does not have access to control another person. So, since nobody's able to control another person, that means somebody having a living human being inside them, they can get rid of it if they do not want it. It's their body, it's their right. Being a living human does not negate the basic rights. Now, of course, this isn't an argument for or against abortion. It's not. I'm not trying for that. I do want to do an argument regarding one of those two later on. I'm planning one, but this one is just to show that being a living human being does not really grant as much as it should. It's not like a coup de grace that's going to say, oh well, it's all done. Said let's cut it the T's. We cut dotted the I's, crossed the T's. We won. Fetus is a living human being. You can't get an abortion. No, it doesn't mean that. If anything, it might have an opposite effect. Because when we take these laws these points that I made, you're not. There's no law that you have to be alive or that you're entitled to things that needed to stay alive. There's property, and the fact that you are entitled to refuse to lend or give out your property or give people access. There's the fact that human beings are their own and their bodies are not property of anybody but themselves. Okay? But when you add something else interesting, it's the fact that before, fetuses were protected once they had a heartbeat. That's when it was said they're alive, is because their heart is beating. I think the reason for that is that more independent or something. I don't know. It's weird. But see, if they do change it, it means that throughout the conception all the way to delivery, a fetus is still considered a fully fleshed human being. So there shouldn't be a distinction between, heartbeat or not. And what this means is that it should effectively nullify the late term abortion rules. Because again, it's a human being throughout the whole way. It's living throughout the whole way, but with the three points I made earlier, it doesn't have a right to access the mother's body without her consent. Okay, guys, I just want to say thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video. I know that I do stutter a lot and I seem like I'm going to pass out in front of the camera, and there's a chance that might happen at one point. But, it's worth the risk. As always, like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Comment. Please, please, please comment too. It's not just about getting the video out there to as many people as possible, which is in itself, really, really important. But as a species, we've kind of lost the ability to actually discuss things. We don't say things. We just sort of assume that we're on different sides. We're not. Logic does not see sides. Logic sees, strong argument or a weak argument. And the only way that we're going to get stronger arguments and stronger stances is if we share our ideas or our opinions. And we actually understand other people and what their opinions are. That doesn't mean that all opinions or ideas are, right in any way, shape, or form. But it will help to break barriers, and it will help us to be able to communicate and see points and, advance as a species. And don't knock communication, because it even scared God in the Bible. Think about it. In the book of Genesis, with the Tower of Babel, God said, if they work together, there's nothing they can't do. And he made it to where people couldn't understand each other. So let's see if we can start a dialogue going and, advance. Until next time, you guys, again, like, share, and subscribe.